I'm really pleased to welcome Julian Venables. He was been in astrology for 30 years and did the diploma in 2010. And he's very multifaceted. He's done everything from phone lines to horoscopes, daily horoscopes, and he's also a maker of talismans. He has a novel called The Astrologer's Apprentice, came out a few years ago, which is a historical drama centered around William Lilly. So that you can check that out online. And his recently published non-fiction work is The Divine Order, which is rediscovering the lost secrets of the planets to restore your place in the universe and release your creative genius. So Julian will be talking tonight about some of the ideas he's been working with in this book. And I was very pleased to hear he says he loves astrology, which is, I think, is always a good thing to hear that from a speaker. So I'll hand over to you, Julian.
Thank you very much, Chris. And thank you indeed, Aquarius 7, for inviting me here this evening. I'm very grateful to be giving a talk to you, so very appreciative of this. So I'll do a share screen, I think, at this point. And if you could tell me that you can see the full screen, is that right? Fantastic. So I think I better start by saying this is a work in progress. It's not a fully defined theory as yet, but I did publish my first book as a proof of concept because the book's beautifully edited, very well laid out, and a very clear guidance system through the idea of using the divine order for astrological enlightenment. And so I think really is a sort of like a bit of an overview, really. I did actually recreate this PowerPoint whilst Mercury's been in Pisces just in the last few days. And I have some other far more colorful ones that are on YouTube, actually. So if you feel you want to listen to me talking more about this, then you can also make reference to some of the other things I've done already on this talk. But I think really what drew me to astrology originally was a search for the truth. I have a bit of a quest, and that is that I've always wondered about that part of our existence that we can't necessarily see in the material world, but that we can perceive in our minds as a vast interior imaginative space. And I think it's reasonably safe to say that imaginative spaces linked to our faith and beliefs, that behind everything is a higher or a greater intelligence. And astrology showed me the higher intelligences as the planets, and helped me to develop a spiritual intelligence and self-knowing. So this, in a way, has been drawing me gradually towards theology. And astrology has helped me see the core of the organized religions. And now astrology has set me on the path to find divinity or enlightenment. The religions generally point to the same thing, a sense of an internal awareness at the center of being, with a core of emptiness or the no thing, the true nature of life. And this tends to manifest as compassion or empathy, and can evolve into experiences of devotional love and unconditional love, like in the correct settings, like ashrams, temples, and retreats. But self-realization is that love springs forth from emptiness and the no thing. And however, organized religions have tended to add rules and orders and guidelines and restrictive structures to that sense of oneness. So when I found astrology and the study of the movements of the planets, I found the higher intelligences and the creative spirits that gave form to imagination and the realization of consciousness. And seeing that in astrology's ancient history, it brought about the origin of the organized religions, I've been wondering why there's a certain something that's missing from modern astrology that maybe we could rediscover and maybe even integrate. And that's the purpose of this talk and why I've written my book. So in a way, there's a little bit of an elephant in the room with astrology. Why is it as the basis of organized religions, the sky, the study of the movement of the planets in the sky, which point towards, if organized religions have at their core a sense of enlightenment, or the divine connection to the divine, yet maybe in astrology we talk about divination, but are we actually practicing our connection to the divine? And I sometimes wonder whether we are. Yes, we're looking at charts, but are we really having a connection to the light that is part of divination? And so I've been wondering why modern astrology maybe has drifted away from the source of the divine creation, and is there a way to like reconnect the dots or to recreate the whole? So the overview tonight is very basically why do we need a new perception? What is the new perception? How can we experience it? How does it relate to the horoscope? And where do we go next? So we're looking at this idea here. I'm going to just go overview some ideas with you. And as I said, this is a work in progress, and I really look forward to actually people giving me their feedback at the end of this talk, because I want to know what you make of this. And as I said, this is a work in progress. So I'm still doing my research. I'm still moving towards finding out more, but I've got a few very interesting pointers, I believe, to help fill out and create this talk tonight. So, including this idea of experiencing it is going to be showing you some very interesting experiments. So this is my book, which is available on Amazon internationally. And I would like to say that anybody buying a copy on Amazon and then leaving me a review, I can in return offer a free astrology reading. So if you leave a review, if you buy my book and leave a review, then I can in turn I will offer a free astrology reading for those who leave reviews. So that's a little bit of an incentive to hope you'll buy my book, because I think you'll find it's very interesting. It's very well edited and beautifully produced. So why do I think, from my personal opinion, could we do with a new perception? So in recent centuries, it could be said that humanity has misaligned itself with the natural forces of the world. And this has caused difficult consequences for how we interact and harmonize with our planet. There are issues around a lack of resources and of resources management. There's wastefulness, sustainability issues, ecological protection issues, pollution, as well as a sense of an overly materialistic and consumerist social politics, inequality, unfairness, issues such as within society, such as depression, anxiety, mental health, mental illness, all sorts of things like this have been coming up a lot over the last couple of hundred years. It seems to be a very current problem that there must be some sort of solution. And when we study mundane astrology as astrologers, we look at the cycles and we go, we sigh and we say, oh, look where humanity went wrong. Oh, back there, we should have done that and should have done this. And we tend to take on a retrospective view of events. We're very retrospective with astrology. Oh, well, it was down to that conjunction that happened then. And we offer up sort of future predictions to society, as is our art. But sometimes society doesn't really listen, to what we've got to say. And so in a way, and as we're astrologers, because we know that society and humanity needs astrology, it's why we're so fascinated by our community, our collective, because it's a fantastic tool. And we would like that everybody were looking at it, everybody were using it. But we seemingly, for some reason, seem to have lost a lot of credibility and become even a laughing stock. You know, often people are joking about it and not taking it at all seriously. And all the while, the world seems to carry on its apparent path of oblivion. You know, it's like, it's polluted now. What's it going to be like even in 20 years' time? Is it going to be worse? You know, this sort of idea. So what I think we need, or my ideas here are that we could do with a big dose of like public relations. You know, we need some kind of good PR. You know, something that we need a whole new appraisal of what we represent and who we are and what we do. And so what dawned on me the moment this started to dawn on me, and this was the quote that really got me on this path. Okay, so it was Robert Zoller of Project Hindsight. And this quote is, the complete study of astrology consists of not merely studying the writings of the ancients, but penetrating their inner meaning and rediscovering their perceptual mode, to see the world as the ancients did, to understand their metaphysics. And the key to what I'm talking about here is this, is the idea of rediscovering their perceptual mode, their sense of perception. How did they perceive the world? And to see it the way that they did. And I think that this is, you know, I asked myself, what did he mean by rediscovering their perceptual mode? He had clearly understood something about the ancient metaphysics that needed to be reintegrated into this modern age. So I kind of understood what he was getting at. If the concepts and judgments that shape our sense of the modern world can be put aside, then the ancient world can re-emerge. And therefore, it's very possible that we could tune into an older form of consciousness. So the traditional astrology books seem to have an inner life and can facilitate an expansion of our awareness of the divine. The limitless capacities of the human soul have been largely forgotten by the modern world today and even rejected. So when we start to look at the inward aspects of our life experience, we start to recognize the felt or mystical level. And it is here that we can embody infinite space, because this is how we can discover the inside of the whole world, which is what the philosopher Owen Barfield theorized. So there's something about rediscovering the perception of the ancients. So the why a new perception? Well, it was the only way. The old perception was the only way of understanding the world for millennia. So the further we go back into history, the more obvious that astrology had a lot of sway and practical use within society. When I look at the Greek philosophers such as Plotinus and Plato, they were writing in a very enlightened manner. I recognize that everything before the dawn of the modern age was inspired by a different view of divinity and the connection to God. So there was for over 1500 years a perception of how we existed in our universe, which, as well as being at planetary level, could also be recognized at the personal level. The original perception was integrated into the church. And the accepted worldview was that the planet Earth was at the center of the universe, still and unmoving and stationary. And around it circled the other visible planets, all in their perfect order and all having perfect orbits. This was geocentricity, or geocentrically. And this worldview went back as far as Plato and Aristotle, and even back before 350 BC. It stretched right back, in fact, to Mesopotamia, Babylonia, Sumeria, the worldviews of even as far back as 3000 BC or even earlier. So this original viewpoint, well, what was this original viewpoint? Well, this is a particularly, I think, quite a good map. It's actually from 1550 by a German astrologer called Peter Appian, but I'm using this because it's the clearest one of the clearest examples of a geocentric universe. And this image represents the ancient cosmology model of the universe. And so by the 2nd century AD, this model had taken on its complete form, and it is what Ptolemy used in the Tetrabiblos and is the basis for traditional astrology. So the understanding of this map was already in place in the 6th and 5th centuries BCE, with philosophers such as Plotinus, Plato, and Aristotle referring to its shape and its cosmological form. But basically what we're looking at here is the basis of the Chaldean order of the planets, also known as the divine order of the planets. So if we start at the center, we find ourselves with the 4 elements at the center here. And as you can see, there's earth and water at the center. Here's a representation of earth with a little building and some trees and a little river and a pond, and the sea is the water, and the pond and the river is the water. So earth and water together. And water is in elements, water is on top of earth. And then we have the air element, which looks a bit like rolling clouds. And above that, then that turns into the rarefied air, which becomes fire. And this is the fiery element. So fire and air move up and outwards in our experience, and water and earth move inwards and downwards in our experience. And so there's a difference in how the elements are expressed. But the 4 elements together make up our corporeal material world, the physical bodies that we're in, the fact that we are born into this realm, and we are in this sense of being and under what is known as the sublunary sphere of the moon, which is the first sphere that we come across. So in this realm, we are in the solid material state of what might be called incarnation, and the 4 elements are bound and fused together by the 5th element, which is called ether. On the either side of the sun, there are the sun is in the middle of the array. So we have the 7 visible planets in order of their distance from the Earth. So here we are on Earth, represented by these 4 elements, and then we have the first sphere encasing us called the moon. Then we have Mercury, then we have Venus. So these are inferior planets and underneath the sun. So between Earth and sun, there are 3 planets: Moon, Mercury, Venus. Then we have the sun, which is the light giver. And then we have superior planets, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, which are above and beyond the sun. And these can be seen as these are represented as the 7 days of the week. So there's the divine order is this movement of the planets by their speeds and their distance from Earth. And I'll talk more about this later, but it's just a general introduction. And after Saturn, we then have the sphere called the firmament, in which where the stars are placed, and the zodiac signs. Then there is that's the 8th heaven, and then we have the 9th heaven, which is the crystal sky, and then we have the 10th heaven, which is the primum mobile. And the primum mobile is the movement, the unmoved movement of the world. It is the thing that creates the movement of all the other spheres, and it is the love of God. So the love of the creator or God that moves all the other spheres. So this is the ancient belief system, and I'm going to explain this tonight with experiments. I'm going to actually show you what I think is a key to really making this far more of a very something that really comes alive in our awareness and our consciousness. So I'm going to show you tonight how to activate all this in what I believe quite a very interesting way. And so that's just the introduction of that there. Now so we lived in the geocentric world that was the way of being for over 1500 years. And then there was a major shift. And this started with Copernicus in 1543, backed up by Galileo a few decades later. And then by the time of Newton publishing Principia in 1687, there had occurred a total shift in consciousness. And this was something that really made an incredible change in humanity. And at the time, it was, I would imagine, thoroughly thrilling and very exciting, because people were starting to see the world completely differently. And there was a shift from the geocentric to the heliocentric. And it took about 150 years for it to happen. And out of it grew the modern age of science, which has predominated over the last, say, 350 to 400 years. And astrologers have been practicing the heliocentric perspective and shifted away from, or even mostly forgot, that they had the blissful divine center of the geocentric before. And I'm going to show you why the geocentric is a blissful divine center in a while. So just bear with me while I get to it. And I'll show you what I've got to show you tonight, which enhances their art and understanding of our place in this universe. The divine center, when I show it to you, is a wonderful experience. So this cultural shift, moving away from the geocentric to the heliocentric, it's kind of distanced ourselves from our spiritual roots, if you like. And but it's important, I think, to remember that the natal horoscope that we still cast, when we cast a natal horoscope today, we do cast it from a geocentric viewpoint. The person is at the center of the chart. And we talk about the timing of the first breath and the infusion of what is the pneuma into the body, which is breath, or the spirit of life. And this is what develops consciousness. So even though we forgot about it, each of us is actually at our own center. We're at our own center point, looking out into the world. And we each have our own world circling around us, which is our own sphere of influence, our own orb of effect. The wholeness of the birth horoscope surrounds our space, and it activates our five senses, which I'll go into in more detail in a bit, so that we are at the center of our own chart. And so if we were to possibly recreate or rediscover the geocentric awareness, how would that enhance our practice of astrology as we have it today? So heliocentricity became this new theory. And the theory was that, and I'm not here to dispute science in any way, because it's very obvious, the planets are circling around the sun. But the sun became this new central spot planet in the newly coined phrase solar system. So the solar system was the new science method of understanding, and it is when we look through telescopes, we can clearly see the planets going around the sun, and we can see it from Earth as well. But I'm talking geocentrically is about what's happening in my space and what's happening in your space, in your personal experience of the world. You had to come to your center, is to have a more of a spiritual approach. And so this dawn of the modern age started to occur. It took the Vatican quite a long time to accept it, and eventually, by the late 1600s, the heliocentric theory finally took over. And that was the dawn of the modern age. And then the geocentric theory became discarded. It literally was forgotten about, forgotten and lost, even. And but in doing so, one could say that we lost something very special, and we didn't even realize that we lost something special. And because the world as we knew it was always at its center. So everybody was experiencing the world from their center point. So everybody had a connection to their geocentric center, where they were at the center of the world that moved around them. And that's because the geocentric map that I showed you earlier was created because from everybody's personal perspective, the world was going around them. It wasn't going around the sun. So there was a spiritual link to being at one center. And this kind of got lost. So in the West, particularly, not so much in the East, because we, still very much practice Hinduism, Buddhism, Sufism, Zen, all these different things have a lot of, self-awareness. But in the West, we tended to lose touch with this, or discarded this geocentric image. And but there were musicians, there were artists, there were poets, there was writers, all who wrote and created based on that geocentric center. And so you can say, for example, well, I'll get onto it later. I'll explain some more later as I get there. So it would appear that we had a point of misalignment with the natural forces of the world by going outside of our center, by moving our consciousness away from our center, away from our self-awareness at center. We were moving it outwards. So our consciousness started to shift up to the sun at the center, the solar system, what's up and out there. And we were no longer placing ourselves at the center, looking out at the world. And this, as a result, ended up creating difficult consequences for how humanity interacted and harmonized with our planet, with the planet Earth. So we had literally gone off kilter. We had gone we'd gone away from our center and out to somewhere else. Now, that somewhere else was the position of the sun, as opposed to understanding that the real spirituality of life is that everything is the mind, all is mind, and that we are at our own center. So heliocentricity became this dominant form, and it continued to be the dominant form for 350 years, 400 years. It's just an image to remind us the sun being at the center. This is one of the new images, and from 1708. But what about the old perspective? And what are we going to do about that? Well, there was a fall of the geocentricity. It fell away, and so astrology, and as it fell away, astrology lost favor. So in the 18th and 19th centuries, as science was developing, the new reductionist, materialistic, heliocentric point overtook the collective consciousness. And, if we had kept the original geocentric viewpoint, I think we would have had a world that was far more enlightened and spiritually progressive, or evolved by now. And this is what this lecture is about, really, because I feel that if we can reintegrate it, I think there's a lot of hope. And I think it's down to us collectively to start to reintegrate this viewpoint. The geocentric, yes, we're heliocentric. Yes, the planets are going around the sun. Yes, there are outer planets. But if we bring ourselves back to our center, then we have something new, a rediscovered perception. So I realized, or it occurred to me, that the whole art of astrology had been affected by the shift from geocentric to heliocentric, because we were starting to act outside of our centers and becoming objective as opposed to subjective. There was a lot more objectivity. That is to say, I walk around the world and the world is not part of me. And that's humanity's current status. People go, how can we? They don't see the world as part of them or in themselves. They see it as separate. So there's a great objectivity that's developed over, say, 300 years. So we've drifted towards a different standpoint that no longer fully embraces the first person perspective. And I'm going to show you that first person perspective tonight via some pretty amazing experiments, which we're getting to. So the importance of this cultural shift is to realize that we lost a divine connection to creation, and I'm going to show you that. And this affected the art of astrology. So after Isaac Newton, geocentricity fell out of fashion. It was even ridiculed. And scientific materialism dominated with reductionism, secularism, and disenchantment. The magic of the world was taken away. And we have been suffering. It's a soul suffering, as a collective, because of the lack of enchantment in this world. And we need to bring it back. Okay? So I'm going to show you tonight how to do that. So as geocentricity fell away, so astrology fell away. In the 18th and 19th centuries, astrology was literally blasted to smithereens. It was almost made effectively illegal. It was reduced to the idea of the fortune teller status, which was, I think, probably not, it was a very difficult times for around about 150, 200 years. Almanacs, which were the incredible books that were published, and everybody used to own an almanac. Well, they turned into desk diaries and newspapers. That's how distant the actual connection to the divine and to the geocentric center. We started to drift right away. The books we used to use, the original ephemeris, that everyone, not everyone, but many people, would have a copy of an almanac that they had with their Bible. So they'd have a Bible and an almanac together on the bookshelf. Well, they turned into desk diaries and newspapers. Then there was a resurgence, started. Firstly, I put this picture up here. This is the Camille Flammarion picture. This is from 1888, I believe. And I think that's quite interesting because it's kind of questing a little bit on astrology and is almost hinting at the idea of a sort of a geocentric kind of, well, it's just an interesting image to observe the mechanics of the universe outside of the sphere. But the first person to really bring about the resurgence of mysticism, spirituality, was Madame Blavatsky. She published Isis Unveiled in 1877. And that was followed by Alan Leo in 1895, who was, carried the torch for the rediscovery of astrology as an art. But he was patching it back together somewhat and recreating it and rediscovering it within and this is important, he rediscovered it within the heliocentric way of being, creating the sun signs for it. So he called it sun signs, for example. And the geocentric center was not really talked about for a long time. And so we used to have that viewpoint, but then we seem to have lost it. And when Alan Leo was recreating sun signs, it became sun as the center, and this became the core development of personality astrology, which led on to the modern astrology of today. So the heliocentric foundations was Alan Leo with his sun signs. The new astrology was built. It was a mystical, of course, the mystical art, but it was built on scientific rational materialism, which was the very thing that had actually crushed it for 200 years. And the heliocentric perspective seemed to become the natural perspective. But I'm not denigrating science, but as astrologers, I think we need to rediscover and have a different perception. And this is going back to this idea of of having a good think about that Robert Zoller quote. What was the perception of the ancients? And this is why I'm bringing this to you today, because I feel I'm discovering something here that as a realization or something to a proposition, if you like. So, why the new perception? Well, when I go to psychic fairs and things like that, and of course on social media and all sorts of things, I believe that the current New Age spiritual culture is thoroughly misguided. We've got people talking about terminology such as 4D and 5D, and the ancient truth of astrology is very overlooked. And again, it's like this elephant in the room, because what do people really need? They really need to have their astrology back, but they need to have that spiritual viewpoint back. Because what is 4D, 5? I mean, honestly, if you'd listen to these people, and I'm not trying to be, but there's some of it is really quite far out. I feel that it would be better placed with actual astrology or the divine connection to creation. And that's what I'm here to talk about. Okay. So what I'm going to suggest is what we need to do is to fully reintegrate astrology and make it a front and center thing for our collective belief system, to show how it is deeply spiritual, unifying and satisfying. And I'm going to show you that by showing you the experiments to show you how to find the geocentric center again and to be thoroughly amazed by it. Okay. And that's why I called this talk Astrological Enlightenment, because I do believe I'm about to show you something, and we're just getting closer and closer to that point. So what is the new perception? The new perception is, in fact, geocentricity rediscovered. So one could say that the new perception is the new perception is the old perception, because here it comes again, the same map. And by taking this and putting it into a modern context, but also realigning it to the understanding of what the organized religions have done with their process of enlightenment or their enlightenment techniques, then one can, if one applies that to theological sort of ideas, then we're going to have something very special, as you're about to see. So, in order to understand the theory that I've got, then we need to look at the Chaldean order again. So this is the order of the planets in terms of their apparent speed as seen from the Earth. And this is, to me, is the movement of the mind. So if one is at the center, standing on Earth, and one is having thoughts arising as a part of the process of life, we have a massive flow of consciousness going through our minds all the time, like a bit like a raging river. Stuff's flowing through all the time. It never stops. And but what I used to notice, and for many years, and I mean literally years, I have had Solarfire open on a desktop where I look at animate charts. This is particularly 15, 20 years ago. I used to have, when I first got Solarfire, I used to open the animate chart and had it on the biggest screen I could find. And I would have it going all day long as the animate chart process. So you can see the planets turning. You can see the 4 angles of the chart moving with time. And I used to notice how when, say, a planet hit an angle, my thoughts would change. Because I've done a fair amount of mindfulness. I've done a modicum of Buddhism, enough to do. I've done mindfulness retreats, Buddhist retreats. I've been a bit of a spiritual seeker for many years. And so I started to, by following the breath, I would then see how the planets would shift with thoughts and thinking, and the flow of consciousness would shift when things went angular, for example. But also in my own chart, if I had put my chart up into the bi-wheel and had the angles moving, then I would also see that very much so, where I would see an angle hitting a planet in my chart and my thoughts would change, or the phone would ring, or I'd go and do something else or something different, or the whole process of living was by the movement of the angles of the chart. the primary motion of the day, at the movement of the planet, would also move my consciousness or move my mind. So for me, the Chaldean order became this order of consciousness flow. So this is why the moon is very receptive to feelings and senses and reactions and responses, because it's the first, we have the encasement in our body of the four elements, and that's the five senses that we have. So we have sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touch, and then you could call sixth sense as well as intuition. But these are all feeding in, and they're coming from the moon, because we're inside the sublunary sphere. So the moon transmits to us all the other planets come through the moon, and that's our first kind of viewpoint, if you like, our first receiver station. It's like everything's funneled through the moon, and then we have Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and then the stars, of course. So Saturn is a slow-moving planet, is a slow-moving mind. Things go very slowly with Saturn. It takes a long time to create something to create reality in one's mind. You can have a feeling that turns into a thought that turns into, and so it's like it moves like a fractal through time. And all this is in my book, by the way. Okay, and it's very well described in my book. So so I'm showing you a slightly different PowerPoint today. I've recreated this a bit to make it a little bit more. I've done a slightly different PowerPoint, but anyway, it's please have a look at the book to understand how I describe this as experiments. Okay, it's like a fractal process of moving from the center outwards. So in my book, I also talk about the planetary hours, because I believe the planetary hours are very key to this process as well. They also work as the Chaldean order of the planets. And when an hour changes these days, thanks to smartphones, you can have apps with planetary hour apps, and they ding when the hour starts, which I think is quite incredible, because if you sit there with your phone and you're having a chat with someone, or you're just walking around or whatever, you'll see the shift of the hour, which is absolutely profound and a very exciting thing to do. So I would like to suggest that if you haven't got a planetary hours app on your phone yet, that you get one, because they are pretty awesome. And this book describes again more on planetary hours and how to use them. So how can we experience what I've been going on about? How can we find this geocentric center and see it as a valid spiritual connection to find our divine connection to the creation? So I'm about to now show you some easy practical experiments, and I would like you please to follow along. Okay, so I'm actually going to turn the share screen off at this point so you can see a better image of me, and I'm going to go through these experiments with you. Okay, and it's quite important that you do them, because you could just watch, but you won't get it if you watch, because these are called self-evident experiments. Okay, so let's see where we go. All right, I'm presuming at this point you can see just me.
You may need to, folks, you may need to go to top right where it says view and change that to speaker view from gallery view.
So I'm now going to, thank you, Chris. I'm now going to do I'm going to show you 4 experiments that you can just do here and now with yourself. The experiments are on your own consciousness. What I'm actually going to show you, these experiments are going to define the difference between awareness and consciousness. And when you define the difference between awareness and consciousness, you will see why the geocentric center, the ancient system of how we saw ourselves at the world and ourselves at center, will suddenly come home in a wonderful experience. Okay, so and then we'll base the rest of the lecture around our feedback. I want to hit in the Q&A afterwards. I'm very interested to hear what what you have to tell me, but please follow me with these experiments. I'm going to be showing you things with my hands, and I want you to do the same thing. Okay? So there's 4 experiments. One is called pointing. The first experiment will be called pointing at your true nature. The second experiment is called two-way pointing. The third experiment is called the closed eyes experiment. And the fourth experiment is called the all-seeing eye. Okay? So, pointing at your true nature. And I'm now going to show you how to do that. So, when you point anywhere in the world, or when you look around you, you point around, you look around the space you are in, you point out at appearances of things. So you are distant from what you are looking at, and you see things, you see objects around you. So I want you to observe something. I want you to direct your attention at things by pointing at them. Okay? So it's very imperative to do these experiments. Okay? So please just follow me, right? And you'll see why. Okay? So I want you to firstly to point, and this is actually the basis of rulerships in astrology and archetypes. Okay? And why things are certain attractive, why things attract things to us. Okay? So there's a deeper meaning behind all this, which will be in later work. I'm going to develop this, but this is the idea of rulerships. Okay, that is top level. I'm going to be working on this further as I develop it with the understanding of the astrology. But I want you to firstly with a pointing finger. So I want you to hold up a pointing finger. Okay, use your first finger like this, and I want you to point at the shapes and colors in the room around you. So in the space that you are familiar with, your room, where you are right now, I want you to point out 2 or 3 things. Yeah. You don't have to say what they are, but I want you to acknowledge, I want your consciousness to register what they are. So for example, I'll give you a few examples. Okay. And so I'm pointing upwards now, the lampshade. I'm pointing up at the ceiling fan. Yeah. Pointing down there, my pet dog, and I'm pointing at some bookshelves. Yeah, and in fact, I'm pointing at a statue, and I'm pointing at a picture. So, and these are things that I can see. Yeah, so I'm pointing at the mouse, for example, my computer mouse, or I'm pointing at pens. That's a pen. Yeah, and I call it pen, and it's a marker pen. But I'm pointing at these things, and everything has a name, everything has a shape, and everything is an object that comes up into my consciousness immediately because I know what it is. Okay, so would you please do that now, just 2 or 3 times at various things in your room, so you're registering in your consciousness that you have absolutely recognized these outward appearances. You're looking outside of yourself at outward appearances of objects. So please do that just for 20 seconds, pointing like this, okay, at different things. And so now you've done that, okay? I now want you to take your pointing finger, and I would like you to point at your foot, okay? And I'm pointing to my foot, all right? I've extended my leg, and I'm pointing to my foot, and there I can see my foot, and it's exactly as I expect it to be. It's there it is. There's my foot, exactly as I expect it, with socks on, etc., etc. And then I want you to carry on pointing upwards, moving upwards. I want you to point at your knee. So there I can see my knee, like covered in a fabric, and it's rounded in shape. So I'm registering the things in my consciousness. I know what these things are. And then I want you to point at your torso. Yeah, like this, pointing at the torso. Oh yeah, there's my torso, right? I know that. That's a part of my body that I recognize as well. I could say I'm wearing a green jumper. And then I want you to point at where others see your face. So taking your pointing finger, I want you to point back at where others see your face. Have you got that? And hold it there. I want you to hold that pointing finger at this space. Now, you are looking inwards. Now, you have to ignore the zoom camera at this point, and then the reflections on the screens and all that sort of stuff. just acknowledge that you have been pointing outwards, objects outside of yourself, and now you're pointing back at the space that you are looking out of. And this is, you're looking inwards. You're turning the direction of your attention around from the objects out there to you, the subject, to the place you are looking out of. Now, at this point, I might like to say, and it's quite an interesting perspective, but have you ever actually seen, without the help of a mirror and definitely without the help of zoom cameras, but have you actually ever seen your own head? No. But you can in a mirror and you can on a camera, like a zoom, but have you actually ever seen your own head? No. Because I look out of it, but I don't look at it. There's a thought for you. Everything's going outwards from the space. I look around and the whole world is filled in my space. Okay. So pointing your finger back, right? So do you see anything at all there? Any color or shape or any movement when I point back at this? Well, it's not technically an object now. I'm actually looking back and I'm pointing back. How would I describe what I'm pointing back at? Well, it's quite odd, really, because I'm actually pointing back at the world. Because the world, I could see the world, right? When I'm pointing back at it, I'm pointing at the space that I'm looking at. So looking into the space or the place where others see my face, I find no color or shape here. I find boundless capacity or awareness on this side of my pointing finger. There's a capacity there for the whole world because the whole world fits inside as I move around. I'm pointing back at the world, looking out at them. So this capacity is in fact very clear, very transparent. It is very self-evidently awake and it's aware because it contains everything in it. So at the same time, the capacity is full of everything happening in it. So it's full of my finger pointing at myself at this space. It's full of my view of the scene beyond. It's full of the sounds and of the feelings as well. So I am now actually seeing who I really am because I'm seeing the boundless one at the very heart of myself. I am seeing into the heart of myself. I'm seeing into my center of myself. The one in whom the world is happening. The world is happening in me as I move around. So now this is starting to show you how the ancients saw the world. Okay. So what do you find when you do this? Are you also looking out into a wide open, crystal clear space? Because it is. That brings me now to the second experiment. So you've just done the first experiment, and each experiment builds on each one. Okay. So now we're going to do an experiment called two-way pointing. So I'm now going to take the second pointing finger, and I want you to put it together with two fingers like this. So you put them together like one pointing in each direction. Okay. And point with one index finger out at the world, and with the other index finger point inwards towards the space you're looking out of. So you're taking the two-way pointing and going back like this. So the finger pointing outwards points at a scene full of all those countless shapes and objects. Yeah. So there's many, many things going on in the world outside, all these different shapes and objects and all these different things. And consciousness, my consciousness is constantly flowing at a very rapid rate because as it takes it all in, yeah, everything's being taken in all the time, yeah, into what I see in the world around me. It is in fact quite a complicated picture. The more time I spend looking at it, the more time there is to see things. And most of it is actually sort of like hidden because it's obscured by one thing or the other. You know, it's just that there's actually a sort of a sense of infinity out there. But the view in is very different. So here the space is not hidden at all. So there's nothing hiding the space that I'm pointing back at. It's very obvious and it's very clear. It's very transparent and it's a pure set sense of awareness. So you can see it all, and you can see it all at once. So it is right here, and it is actually what I am, pointing at my awareness. I'm pointing back at the space that is my awareness. So this is the part of me that I can actually never lose. I was born with it. Okay. And this is very key to what I'm going to be talking about as we move forwards, right? To be born with this space. This space was part of my experience at birth. Okay. The space that I'm pointing back to now, right? So what could be simpler than seeing this and, say, being this as well, right? This is my connection to divinity. It's my connection to the creation, because I am the source of creation. When I point back at the space that I'm looking out of, then I am pointing back at my source of creation. So it's very uncomplicated. It's transparent. It's open to my own inspection. It's nearer than near. It's given in its entirety. And therefore, is this who I actually really am? And therefore, am I pointing at this vast infinite space of everything with the full capacity for the endlessly changing view out and the room for the amazing world? Well, yes, it's an amazing world. And it appears in me because I'm looking at the space that I'm looking out of. And the world appears in me. So when we talk esoterically about as above and so below and so within and so without, as within and so without, we're talking about the mirror of reflection, yeah, the Dharmic mirror, if you like, or the mirror, which is also what in Sufism and in Islamic astrologers, Ibn Arabi and people like that used to talk about mirror of the moon, yeah. So we're pointing back at this space that contains everything. So to find out, just look back at your space. Just use your finger and say, oh, room around me, all the things outside of myself, and then I'll point back at myself to find my space. Oh, there it is. Ah, that's all right. Not too bad here, really. Quite calming, quite relaxing. And I can create what I like from this. Okay. So that now brings us to the third experiment. Okay. So having found this space, okay, this capacity for the whole world, I'm now going to ask you to close your eyes. And when you close your eyes, okay, I do actually want you to keep them closed for a couple of minutes while we go through this experiment, okay? And so just to find a nice relaxed moment, just to close your eyes and just enjoy being in the space with eyes closed, okay, as you listen. So with eyes closed, and this, of course, is so 3, 2, 1, and close your eyes. Now we're in the space that we dream in. Yeah, we actually spend half our lives pretty much with our eyes closed, and we dream in this space, which creates our own worlds, So keeping your eyes closed, please. You could ask yourself, who or what are you at this point? You could say to yourself, well, how big am I? Can you measure it? Can you measure? This is key to understanding the real magic of astrology here, okay? Is to say, well, how do I measure the space when my eyes are closed? Well, I can't measure it. Yeah. Can I describe the shape that I am? Well, I'm this vastness of infinity inside. Yeah. And there's no particular shape to it. I could imagine the shape. I can create a shape. But when my eyes close, I don't have a shape. So have a look to see what you find, to see where you are with your eyes closed, keeping them closed. Just see that vastness of actual infinity that you're inside. This is the inner space. We talk about outer space and we look outside of ourselves into outer space, but we can also look inwards to inner space. And inner space is just as wide and vast as outer space. So try to look for boundaries at this point. Yeah, you can seek them out and they're like, well, there's a sort of something. No, there isn't one. There's just infinity out there, but it's the inner space of outer space. So it's at this point, just rely on what is happening in this present moment. Okay. So settle into the eyes closed. you can now ask yourself questions like, do you have a name in that space? Do you have how old are you? Well, actually, when my eyes are closed and I'm not, I'm actually infinite, right? So this is the real magic of astrology now, because we talk about reincarnation and we talk about the, life after life and how the birth chart contains but actually now I've pointed this space out and it's infinite. I don't really have an age, because actually I'm immortal, because I've just pointed at my soul, my space that is my soul. And with the eyes closed, you could say, well, am I male or am I female? Well, only with eyes open can I measure these sort of things. Am I in fact human? Well, I'm a space, that's for sure, and I'm inhabiting my human experience. So trying to define your shape, can you count how many fingers you've got? Can you count your toes? Well, when I bring my hands together and rub them together with my eyes closed, I can sense, I get a strong sensory perception, but I receive it as a sensation that isn't necessarily, it's just a series of, it's a series of transmitted transmitted feelings. And so there's this boundless space, or an infinite space of experience, and it's full of various sensations and thoughts and feelings, all of which are just flowing into it, into this vast space. So are you in fact as spacious now as when your eyes were open? Because when you're closed, you're in the same space as when your eyes are open. Now, in a lot of the organized religions, they talk about the creation, they talk about the Big Bang or the flood or these sort of things, this idea of a metaphorical, allegorical experience. But I'm now going to show you how to have your own personal Big Bang, which is really quite exciting, because hopefully your eyes have been closed for the last couple of minutes. And when I say 3, 2, 1, you can open your eyes. So open your eyes now, and you're going to get the flood or the Big Bang, when out of nothingness, out of the no thing, you will suddenly have everything. So 3, 2, 1, and open your eyes, and everything comes back. And everything is here, and it's now, and it's measurable, and it's exactly as you left it before. But it's spacious. It's very, very spacious. So you've moved into recognizing that the space within is the space without. Okay. And this is helping you to recognize the geocentric realization that the ancients used to have. I strongly believe that the ancients lived very much with their connection to divinity instantaneously. They could choose to have it at any moment, whenever they liked. And they would just flip from one to the other, from first person perspective to third person. So they could do that. And you'll see that in all the organized religions, this idea that you can move from one space to the other. And this is the geocentric center. And it's the space that we dream in when our eyes are closed. When our eyes are open, it's the space that we measure. And this is, of course, the origin of numbers, the origin of measurement, the measurement of the sky. But it was all happening within as well as without. Okay? So it's just plenty of things to think about. Okay? And to consider and to contemplate. So you can see that you have within you a space. And the space stays the same, eyes open or eyes closed. What is at your center is everything. The whole universe is at your center. And this is why astrology is such an amazing art, because you have the map that is your whole universe. And the chart says this is happening here, this is happening here. And sure enough, you're experiencing it. But what you are experiencing is the inner space that's occurring, as well as, and it's the unification of the inner and the outer through the process of the chart. Okay. So it's a wonderful realization. And, in what we could call this, and I'm going to do one more experiment now, is the void, the VOID, the void. I'm now going to do the fourth experiment with you, which is actually my favorite one. And this is what I would call the opening of the third eye. Okay, so this is the really quite rather marvelous, this one, and it's also the all-seeing eye. Okay, which you might have heard about in, you see it in the tarot, the Lenormand deck. They have a card called the all-seeing eye. I don't know if I'm talking about. You get the idea. So anyway, like a tarot deck, right? So the all-seeing eye experiment. I want you to hold your hands out in front of you and to make a pair of like glasses, like a binoculars. Okay, so you could just, you've just done this, like that. So take your hands and put them together like that, and then I want you to slowly bring them. You can see two holes, can't you? When you put your hands together like that and you're looking through, you can see two holes. You can see two holes, like a pair of glasses. I want you to bring them forwards, and put them on. Okay, like this, and when you put the glasses on, well, what happens between the dividing line between the two holes? Well, I want you to start actually opening the fingers and thumbs open here like this, because the dividing line starts to sort of vanish, really. Okay. So you were looking at the world, you look at the world through your two eyes, you put your glasses, the binoculars on, and you open them up, and it starts to become more of an open space. In fact, the dividing line disappears, and leaving instead one undivided, edgeless space that you're looking out of. It's like a space, isn't it? Because I had two eyes I see the world with, and then I open them up, and it becomes one eye that I see the world through, right? Because I always used to always seeing the world through two eyes. But when I do that, I then have one eye that I see the world through. That's pretty amazing, right? So I have two eyes to see, and then I have a third eye that appears like this. And I'm suddenly looking at the world through one undivided window, like an edgeless window, a vast space, And it has actually a sides to it, has an edge to it. And the edge is framed by my hands. So when I bring my hands around the edge like this, I can see them on the edges of my vision. I can wave my fingers at myself. And I can draw my hands back, and they vanish. And I bring my hands backwards, I pull them back, and they vanish. Now, I am aware that my hands are there. I have awareness that the hands are there, but I have to bring them forwards again to consciously recognize them, to consciously see them. There they are again. Hello, hands. But then they go away again, and I pull them back. So there's this edge. There's this incredible edge. And when I follow the edge around, bring it up here, I can see the hands at the top doing the same thing, vanish and forwards again, vanish and forwards. And then I bring it round here like this. And I bring it down here. And if I look down, I can't see my chin. Can't see my chin. Never have done. Don't know where it is. In fact, I can't actually see the top. I can only see a certain line. It is like a line, I'm sort of floating in a space, because there's the edge, like a sphere. I'm actually inside a sphere. Can you see the sphere around yourself? There's this wonderful, and it's like a lens or a big, vast eye or sphere of being, and it's infinite because, of course, it contains the whole world. I can point I can't find the edges, but I'm naturally in it. The edges are just part of it. I'm just I sort of move with it. It's my orb, like an orb of influence in my life. Orb, and it's like a sphere, right? Perfect. It's perfect. It's just this perfect round sphere. If I look up into the night sky, it contains stars and planets. If I look into the room I'm in, it contains all the things that I'm used to, the objects of my life, if you like. But I'm inside this vastness of rounded sphere, and I can't look directly at the edges of it, And is there an edge? Well, it's just like this roundness. And so it makes, of course, one starts to think of things like Pythagoras, music of the spheres. But then, of course, one goes back to the original geocentric model that I showed you earlier, the seven spheres, the spheres. Yeah. The interlocking crystalline spheres that the ancients, ancient civilizations, ancient divinity had seven spheres, that they were inside of seven spheres. And I think I've just shown you your seven spheres. And this, the way that they are, the way they come into the chart and are in our charts as transit, things are moving. And so the edges of the spheres, things appear, right? So I'm getting a Saturn transit. Well, Saturnian type of experiences enter my sphere. Then I'm getting a Jupiter transit, and Jupiter things appear in my sphere. So it appears in my consciousness. Now, but all the time, I am at my center. I'm actually at my center, and my center never goes away. And my center is this vast, beautiful space of awareness that's at the center. Yeah. So the world does, in fact, move through me, and I don't go anywhere. The world is moving through me. So I move around and the world moves through me, because when I'm at my center, I don't go anywhere. For example, I get on I climb into my car to drive, and I sit in a seat and I'm driving. Am I actually moving anywhere? No, the world is moving through me. I'm sat still. But the experience is the world moves through me. If I get on a bus and sit on a seat on the bus, I get on at one bus stop, and I sit down, and am I moving? No, but the next bus stop is appearing in my consciousness, because it just appears. Because I've stayed at my center. By being at my geocentric center, I'm stationary and unmoving at the center of my world. And this is how the ancient civilizations and the ancient divine connection to creation was. And the key to astrology right now is that I believe Pluto in Aquarius, folks, Pluto in Aquarius, it is time to adopt and recreate and rediscover this rather marvelous way of being, because the chart isn't exactly what it is, right? It's geocentric, it's drawn geocentrically, so it maps it all out for us. And here we are having experiences that could be akin to enlightenment. Because once you've done this and you find this edge, well, what's behind it? Well, it's called the void. There's this huge space. It's an infinity is right behind it. Yeah. It's like, wow, I'm standing on the edge of infinity. Now that's pretty incredible. But that means you can now activate manifestation and the law of attraction. These are new age terms that people use, but I'm actually showing you how to do law of attraction, because you can now observe when you go to your center, or you close your eyes, or you do your third eye, and you start to become aware of the flow of consciousness, which is the transits. Because a transit, people talk about transits. Well, a transit gives the impression of movement, doesn't it? A transit that, no, but you get it. Transit's a movement, yeah? But where is that movement? Well, it's moving through me, yeah? I stay at my center and the transits move through me. So this is the Pluto and Aquarius viewpoint that I think we should be adopting. We should take it on board, because it's pretty exciting. And I think it's going to make our art far more interesting. And I'm going to show you a bit more now, So I've shown you that beyond the single eye, the single edgeless eye, this great sphere that is vastness. On the edges, beyond it is a vastness of the great void. I can show you that through all the organized religions. I'll show you that in a minute. I'll show you some images. But so it's just a good time to actually say, well, how wide is the eye? of this. How wide is this space? It's actually infinite, because you see, it encompasses the whole world, because the whole world is in it. So yes, it goes actually beyond the stretch of my arms. It actually encompasses the whole world. I'm still at my center when I think like that. I encompass everything, and yet I'm still at my center. So it's really taking a fresh look at yourself, and it's overlooking possibly the fact that we've overlooked something very obvious and actually wonderful. And we integrate that with our astrology, and we can take astrology with Pluto and Aquarius now. We can take astrology into where it should be, front and center of spiritual movement, okay? Because we've rediscovered the geocentric viewpoint, which is the viewpoint that has been around for 2,000 years. We just forgot it for the last 400 years. Okay, so that's quite exciting, and it's the big window. It's like the all-seeing eye. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the and I hope everyone's with me still and kind of okay with this. But Plotinus in the Enneads talks about this space. This is the one. What I've shown you today is the one, yeah, because it is the one, yeah. So that's what I'll say. Therefore, without reading quotes from Plotinus, but you get the idea, right? And here is this is a on display in a museum in Rome, and it's called the Pantagio plate. And as you can see, it's how the Romans used to connect to their gods. Yeah. So here you have someone doing the single eye. There he is. He's supporting the eye. Yeah. And inside a god is appearing. Yeah. The gods are appearing inside that space, which is the flow of consciousness. Okay. So once you've discovered the source of awareness, your center point of awareness, then the consciousness starts to become manifest as the gods. Yeah. And that's how it is. Right. So it's pretty powerful and rather exciting. And I'm sure you're going to have a good time with this, because you go and do this down on the beach or up on the hills or walking through the park or wherever, and you're going to start to have a really interesting experience. Looking at the sky is really interesting. Just a quick organized religions. Yeah, well, look, there they are. You see the halo. Yeah, so whenever go to a church and you see the stained glass windows with the halos, what is the halo? Well, there it is. You have just recreated your own halo. Got that? Yeah, there it is, right? And the angels are talking through you around the edges, exactly as depicted here. This is something for everybody to enjoy. Everybody can have this, right? And as astrologers, folks, it's astrology to come home to astrology. We did not have this for 400 years, and now you've got it. So there's Plato, okay? Okay. So Plato in the Timaeus, it has quite a nice little quote. The shape that the maker gave it was the one that was both appropriate and natural to it. The appropriate shape for the living being that was to contain all living beings within itself would be the one that includes all shapes within itself. And so he made it, the creator, made it perfectly spherical, equidistant in all directions from its center to its extremes, because there is no shape more perfect and none more similar to itself. Similarity being, in the maker's opinion, comparably superior to dissimilarity. That's just a short bit of Greek philosophy for you there, from probably one of the most famous books that astrologers can refer to as the origins of astrology, is the Timaeus by Plato. But so I'm basically proposing that all the ancient civilizations were very familiar with the geocentric sense of being, that it could in fact have been the original state of being for humanity to have evolved from. We actually started geocentric, and then we started moving into third. We were always first person awareness, and then we went third person awareness. And today, you see, humanity is desperate to go first person awareness again. And do you know why? Because video games. Think of all the kids playing video games, right? They do first person games, right? So you can imagine yourself, you've got the TV screen in front of you, all these video game players, right? They've all got their keypads playing like this, right? But look at the screen they're looking at. What's coming out of the screen is you can't see the head of the person playing. You don't see the head of them. You just see the hands appearing. That's first person. And that is actually, it is a digital spiritual experience. Think about it. It's amazing, right? But that's actually what's happening. And so this is how far away we need to be with regards to catching up with ourselves, right? So Plato quote, I've shown you the void, seeing as the ancients did, and learning to be geocentric. Okay. Now, quickly jump, if I can, I've got enough time to show you how it relates to the horoscope. This is very key. Have I got much time left? I hope I've got enough time. Maybe we can go to the Q&A a bit and just keep going. But basically, how do the experiments that I've shown you relate to the horoscope? Well, it relates through primary and secondary motion. Okay. So here is the primary motion and secondary motion diagram. And primary motion is at the point of birth, when we took our first breath and when we cast the horoscope. Okay, so the birth chart, of course, is the actual central part of our art. It's the key to everything, is the birth chart. But what actually happened at the moment of birth? Okay, individual appears in the world, yeah, and takes a breath, and that's the moment that the chart is cast. So the breath is the pneuma, which is the spirit of life. That takes it on board, and we start breathing. With breath, awareness is created. Okay. So everything comes into color and form. Boom, we're alive. And that's awareness. So the origin of the birth chart is pure awareness. All this experiment, all this showing you this, is to show you, actually, to take you in a quick way to the moment of birth, because it's pure awareness. So I'll show you this. This was what the individual experienced, what we all experienced at birth. Awareness. We didn't have any. Consciousness starts at birth. But the first thing that happens is awareness, okay? And because then it's like, wow, well, what is this space? It doesn't have a name, does it? I mean, when you're born, I don't say, well, I'm in this space, and these are people that I recognize and know and have names for, and objects around me, and it's just like, whoop, what's this? Pure awareness. So at birth, we come into pure awareness. So what's actually happening? Well, to get pure awareness, we had to land on our planet. We had to land on planet Earth. We had to corporeally appear through the moon, through the mother, through the moon. We're born into the sublunary sphere, into the earthly realm, to take on the corporeal form. Spirit grew out of spirit grew a form. Spirit grew a form, and the soul descended through the spheres and inhabits it with the inhalation of pneuma. Okay, and so then the person, the being, the human, the personality becomes alive and starts to grow their consciousness from that point forward, which is the personality. So of course the chart then maps the individual's life. Fantastic, right? But what is the awareness exactly at the moment of birth? Well, the awareness is the primary motion. So it's the rotation of our planet, the rotation of the planet, okay, creates the 4 angles, yeah, and the 12 houses, right? Now, interestingly enough, when I point back at myself here and I do this, I feel like I'm quite nicely encased, yeah? This gives me a feeling of being encased in something, yeah? I'm actually encasing myself in my primary motion, right? And this encasement is a bit like 12 houses, the house of God, if you like. I'm in the house. There's houses of God, which is the four angles as well, pointing all outwards, pointing into secondary motion. So the four angles are pointing outwards into the infinity. Ascendant, descendant, MC, nadir, yeah, and they're pointing outwards to find a landing point within the ecliptic, yeah, which of course then, my rising sign is this, my midheaven is this, my, right, it's in different signs. But that initial awareness is the infinite orb or sphere that is that I am in, and that stretches out to encase the whole universe, which is the chart. So primary motion is this rotation of the planet on its own axis. And another thing which is very beautiful to add, just a sort of a moment of a sort of really interesting thing, is when the planet turns, and of course we have sunrise in the mornings and we have sunset at night, and then it goes dark. The heavens actually haven't gone out, because the sun doesn't actually go out. The sun is a constant light giver. And so in the daytime, when I look up at the sky and I see blue sky, yeah, that's actually the color of the heavens. And that's how ancient man used to see it as well. The heavens up above. So when you see people pointing upwards, heavens in plural, we're in the heavens. We're in the heavens. And it's all blue, beautiful blue, yeah? And it's only because the primary motion that I'm on, my feet, my boots on the ground, as it were, standing on planet Earth, that when the planet rotates and I go into the dark phase, that's because the sunlight is not shining on the face of the planet anymore. And I see the reflections of the sunlight in the stars of what we call the night sky. But actually, it's still blue out there. Think about it. It's great. It's a lovely contemplation, particularly at sunrise and sunset, think about that. It's wonderful.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And it felt, I was feeling it was very appropriate for a Mercury conjunct Neptune in Pisces. It's a good time to be doing this.
Excellent.